the CRTC is now
Oh,
going
yes.
to make Canadians, even if you try to escape the clutches of unwatchable Canadian content on the CBC and other terrestrial broadcasting, that doesn't matter. Because not only are you paying for it through your taxes and subsequent media bailouts, now you're over minding your own business on Netflix. You're over on Disney Plus minding your own business. Maybe you're watching on Paramount, Amazon Prime. Doesn't matter. You're still going to have to pay for that stuff you ran away from, thanks to a 5% tax that the CRTC says, no worries, the streamers will pay for it, the streaming services. They won't. They're going to pass it along to us. And apparently the only person who's going to escape this tax in all of Canada is Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland, because wouldn't you know, she professes to have canceled her Disney Plus. All this stuff gets passed along to the taxpayer and the consumer. It doesn't affect the streaming services. They just tack it onto our bill at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. So this happened in British Columbia years ago, and they put it in the weirdest possible wording, the provincial government there, but we still found it on budget day. And yeah, essentially, it's a Netflix tax. It's a streaming tax. So back then it was applying to Netflix, Spotify, SoundCloud, basically anything that came from outside of Canada that was a streaming service. And I think on average it was going to be adding something like $15 to the bill or something like that. Yeah, to your point, these companies won't just eat this.
No.
They do not just eat this, okay? Number one, that's not how corporations make money. Okay, spoiler alert. Number two, Canada, just by its population, is not a big enough player for them to bother even thinking about eating it. Right. They will just tack it on to our cost. And I'm old enough to remember back when Prime Minister Stephen Harper warned that the Trudeau government would put through a Netflix tax. And I think that was called fake news and everybody threw tomatoes. Here we are. Now, again, I'm not saying that, a blue team would never do something like this. We would go after them just as hard if they tried doing something like this. Again, we already pay close to 50% of our wages in taxes. Okay, this is just another one where they're imposing it upon Netflix. And again, you're right. Here it is. It's going to be funneled back in some way, shape, or form to Canadian content programming. And again, people aren't watching the CBC. And what really was a bee in my bonnet was one of the times when Tate was at committee and she was very rightly getting grilled over the fact that the CBC's ratings are plummeting. Like around 1-ish%, give or take, of Canadians are watching the 6 o'clock news, for example. 1%, thereabouts. And she said something to the effect of, well, yes, TV ratings are down, but we're making up for it in GEM, CBC GEM. And it's like, okay, tell us how many people are watching through CBC GEM. We don't release that information. So that's like the kid in elementary school who swore he could turn invisible. Just when you're not looking at him, though.
Right.
It's ridiculous. And here we are paying for it.
Yeah, they said the funding will be directed to areas of immediate need in the Canadian broadcasting system, such as local news on radio and television, French language content, Indigenous content, and content created by and for equity-deserving communities, official language minority communities, and Canadians of diverse backgrounds.
I think that's also called the CBC.
Yes.
That's the definition or the long form definition of what they're trying to hide there. Isn't that wild? It's very similar to what I would refer to as the link tax.
Yes.
Right? So
this is just the streaming version of the link tax.
Yeah, exactly. So that's, again, folks, why you can't post news stories onto Facebook anymore, because Facebook told the Trudeau government to get bent and that they weren't going to be paying a fee, every time that they allowed for a news story to be posted on their sharing service. Again, this is bizarre. It's like taxing the paper boy for the sin of delivering your paper. It is the weirdest thing ever for content and sharing. But Google did go along with it, from what I understand. And again, guess who's taking the lion's share of the Google money? That was CBC. So this whole little snowball started, apparently so, this is how the story goes, with a few print guys So there were a few print guys saying, hey, the CBC's eating our lunch because, of course, they were only meant to be a broadcast service. They were never meant to be print. But now, of course, they're print online. They do that all the time. So a lot of the original print guys were pretty mad about that, saying you're exceeding your mandate and jumping the fence and you're mowing my lawn. Stop doing it. And so this is one of the reasons why they got together and they said, hey, let's make a corporation like Google pay for it. And here we are. The CBC just rode right in, and they're actually taking the lion's share of the so-called link tax, much to the chagrin of the print guys. So again, anytime you try to get the government in on something, they're going to make it worse. Like they're just going to make it worse. And here we are with a Netflix tax.
Yeah, and that link tax, I mean, it blew up in the people who wanted the handouts face, right? Because now Facebook was this great way to deliver news to consumers where the news consumers are. They're generally a little bit older people are on Facebook. They're finding their news there, clicking through. The advertisers see, oh, you're getting a ton of traffic to your website. Let me advertise with you. Advertising dried up,
of course,
for a lot of these Canadian news companies because their reach dried up nearly instantly because they weren't getting their news. People weren't getting their news where they were looking for it anymore. So careful what you wish for, jerks.
Yeah, and for folks who are watching, and I understand where like, oh, well, mainstream media, blah, blah. No, it wasn't just the mainstream media that was getting hurt by this. This was a lot of independent news organizations like Western Standard. We love Western Standard. They were getting nuked by this ridiculousness because the Trudeau government started messing around with this industry. And they don't take government money. They're an independent news organization. They just finished signing the Ottawa Declaration saying, no, we're not going to take government money for media. And sure enough, though, of course, they were doing on a private company, private business, Facebook, and they're getting hurt by this. Again, folks, don't expect the government to come rolling into town and roll up on your property and make things better. Reagan was right when he said, I'm from the government and here to help, or really scary words.
Yeah. Everything they do is generally makes it that much worse. There's nothing that they do that is really all that benevolent. Before I let you go, because I could talk to you all day, and we always have a robust conversation before I hit record. But
it was about Sasquatches mostly. It was really awesome.
It was. We have our theories. We share theories. I want to talk to you about this hidden carbon tax report. So the government has a carbon tax report, but much like the CBC bonuses, we don't get to see it. What's going on there?
So this is a complicated thing. Okay, so folks probably remember the Parliamentary Budget Office had come forward with a report. I think it was around last year. In fact, I think it was around this time last year, basically where they had two separate numbers. The top number of their grids was just the straight cost for Monica filling up her Honda Civic in downtown Toronto. So that would be about $675 if I'm doing my math right. So boom, straight across, how much does she get in rebate? Okay, that is what the Trudeau government was cherry picking for months, saying you get more back than you pay in. Okay. Number one, anyone with a shred of common sense understands that you can't hand the government a 20 and get back a 50 at no cost to you.
Right.
That doesn't work
scheme.
That way. Thank you.
That's a pyramid scheme.
Thank you. They do not have a wealth generating machine under West Block. Okay. This is not how this works. There's no lady there spinning flax into gold. Okay. So that aside, there was also a second number that Yves Giroux, the head of the Parliamentary Budget Office, had calculated. And that is what the Taxpayers Federation talked about all the time. That is what the Conservatives talked about quite often. That's frankly what the NDP should be bringing up all the time too. So that is basically the cost of filling up your vehicle. So it's about $20 now per pickup truck, just in the carbon tax. Around $400 per household here in Alberta, for example, to heat your home with natural gas. Then you layer in the trucker's cost. So that's about $200 in diesel for the carbon tax every time they're filling up their trucks, plus the farmers. Now you get the layering effect. Okay. That is the other number, the second number that the Parliamentary Budget Officer came up with. Okay. That's what everybody talked about. So including the Taxpayers Federation, when we say the PBO estimates that over $900 will be the net cost for an average Alberta family. That's all your background. All that said, now the Parliamentary Budget Office, I'm not quite sure why, are recalculating the carbon tax cost. So I think there was a question as to whether or not the researchers at the Parliamentary Budget Office had included what's often referred to as the industrial carbon taxes of various provinces when they were doing that second calculation number. Okay? That's what I've heard. Okay? That is like the scuttlebutt that we've been hearing. Now, what was interesting, because of course we heard that, and we're like, really? Because that's a pretty big number and a pretty
Yeah.
big factor. Like, if you factor that in, you need to account for it, and
Right.
we need to know. Like, number one, we know that it still costs Canadians. Like, you can't put a tax on the lifeblood of the economy of gasoline, diesel, and natural gas, how we eat and heat and move, and not cost Canadians a ton of money.
Yep.
That's understood. But we were concerned because we like having the exact precise number to point to in a chart. Now, this is the key. Apparently, Giroux, the parliamentary budget officer, says, oh, this is still a cost, like net cost. So the Trudeau carbon tax is still a net cost to the majority of Canadian families, is what the verbiage is coming out of that office right now. But apparently that, as far as I understand, that part of the report that they're trying to recalculate, they're apparently not letting him say so. They're not letting him release that number or that information. It's ongoing right now as of our taping on Tuesday. Like, there's back and forth at a committee and everything and happening in the House of Commons. So that's where we're at as of right now, is apparently the Trudeau government is not letting the parliamentary budget officer release that new number.